I always thought I knew Emily pretty well. We got married young, built a life together, and for the most part things seemed solid. She was the kind of woman who always had a sharp tongue and a quick comeback, but deep down, I believe she loved me. We had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing that seemed insurmountable. That was until last month when everything started to unravel. It started with small things, texts she would hide when I entered the room, hurriedly slipping her phone into her purse, or her getting defensive when I asked about who she was talking to late at night. I didn't think much of it at first. I told myself maybe she was just busy with work or catching up with friends. But then she started acting strange around her phone. She'd lock the screen, and her responses became curt and dismissive. She'd say I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I was. I noticed her phone was quiet when I came close, and her eyes darted around like she was hiding something. One night, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I caught a glimpse of her phone lying face down on the counter, and something just didn't sit right. I picked it up without thinking, and I saw a notification from a guy named Jake with a message that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, miss you already." My stomach dropped. I felt this cold punch in my gut, like I'd been punched in the chest. That was the moment everything changed. I couldn't unsee what I saw. I stared at the message, and my mind raced through all the questions. Who was Jake? Why was Emily hiding this? Was this just some fling, or was it something more? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was right there. The way she'd been acting, secretive, defensive, evasive, made it clear she'd been hiding something. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at her, her face peaceful as if she hadn't just betrayed me. The next day I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't live like this, wondering what she was up to behind my back. I waited until she was home, and then I asked her straight out. I told her I saw the message, and I needed the truth. Her reaction was almost laughable. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being ridiculous, that I was paranoid and insecure. She said Jake was just an old friend she'd been talking to about work, and I was overreacting. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was crazy for suspecting her, that I was just jealous because she worked late. But I knew better. I could see the flicker in her eyes, the way she hesitated before lying outright. I knew she was hiding something. It hit me like a ton of bricks. She was cheating. Not just some casual fling, but something real. I asked her if she was sleeping with him, and she denied it. She said I was blowing things out of proportion, that I was overreacting. Honestly, she was so bitchy about it, so dismissive, that it made me angrier. She was lying through her teeth, trying to brush me off like I was some idiot. And I could tell she was lying because I'd seen the truth in her eyes. The emotional impact hit me hard. I felt stupid for trusting her for so long. I felt betrayed, angry, and crushed. How could she do this to me right under my nose, especially after all the years we'd been through? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut repeatedly. I was so torn, part of me wanted to yell, to scream, to break everything in sight. Another part just wanted to crawl into bed and hide from the world. But mostly I just felt numb. I knew I couldn't just ignore this anymore. I had to decide what to do next. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't shake the image of her lying there, the way she'd looked at me with that dismissive smirk, like I was some paranoid fool. I spent the next few days in a fog of confusion and rage. I kept replaying the moments, trying to find something, anything, that indicated she'd been lying all along. But honestly, part of me just didn't want to believe it. I had loved her for so long, and now I was faced with this brutal reality. I started digging. I couldn't just rely on that one message. I needed proof. So I installed a discreet app on her phone. I knew it was wrong, but at that point I did care. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. Over the next week, I secretly monitored her activity. What I found was worse than I expected. There were dozens of texts, messages, and photos exchanged with Jake, sexually charged stuff, flirtatious, intimate. She'd been lying to my face, pretending to be this innocent wife when she was out there throwing herself at my brother, Mark. Mark. I never thought he'd do something like this. I always trusted him, trusted her. But my suspicions were confirmed when I found out they'd been seeing each other behind my back for months. Months. I couldn't believe it. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. She was pregnant now, too. She told me she was just hanging out with friends when she was really with him doing God knows what. The worst part was not just the betrayal but the fact that she'd lied about everything, lied right to my face, over and over. I thought about how it all started to fall apart. The way she'd stopped caring about our anniversary, how she'd been distant and cold, those were the signs, but I ignored them. I wanted to believe she loved me, but in reality she was busy sneaking around, getting pregnant with my brother's kid. I kept asking myself, how does someone do this? How do you betray your vows, your marriage, your family, and still have the nerve to lie? I was furious at her, but I also felt so deeply hurt, like my entire world was shattering. Once I had enough evidence, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I planned to confront her again, but this time I wanted to do it with all the facts laid out on the table. I waited until she came home from her work trip, which in reality was the weekend she spent with Mark. I had everything ready, the texts, the photos, the call logs. When she stepped through the door, I just looked at her and handed her the phone. Her face changed instantly, her eyes widened, and she knew she was caught. She tried to deny everything, saying I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure, just like last time. She told me I was crazy and that I didn't understand her, that she wasn't cheating, that it was all just a misunderstanding. She even said she was doing this for us, that she thought a baby from Mark would somehow fix everything. That's when I lost it. I told her she was a lying bitch, that I knew about the affair, about the pregnancy, about everything. I told her I'd never forgive her for cheating on me with my own brother. Her reaction was to become venomous, calling me paranoid and accusing me of trying to control her. She said I was the reason she cheated, because I was boring and absent. She claimed she was still loyal to me, that Mark was just a mistake she'd been too deep into to get out of, and that she wanted to keep the baby. The whole thing was a whirlwind, her crying, her screaming, her trying to guilt-trip me. But I saw through all her lies. I saw her true face that day, the bitch she'd kept hidden behind her charm and attitude. That moment, I felt my heart turn cold. I was so angry, so betrayed, that I couldn't see how to move forward. I just wanted to get out of that house, get away from her lies, her cheating, her betrayals. I did. Sleep that night. All I could do was sit there, staring at the wall, thinking about what my life had become. I never thought I'd be one of those guys whose wife cheats with his brother, who ends up with a kid on the way from that betrayal. But here I was, completely destroyed, wondering how I'd ever trust again. The aftermath hit me like a freight train. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to process everything: her lies, the affair, the fact that she was pregnant with Mark's kid. I couldn't believe I got played like that, especially by my own brother. The betrayal was so deep that I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, but I knew deep down it wasn't about me. She was a lying, manipulative bitch who decided to cheat behind my back and then somehow thought she could spin it as some kind of for-us plan. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her lies. I felt so humiliated that I wanted to disappear, but I also knew I had to do something, to make a decision. I couldn't just sit around and let her keep lying to me, pretending everything was fine. I started thinking about what I wanted, what I deserved. I realized I couldn't stay with her, not after all this. She had broken every vow, every trust, every ounce of loyalty I thought we shared. So I began planning my next move. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I wanted to be prepared. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to take her lies anymore. I also knew I needed support, so I reached out to some friends I trust, people who wouldn't judge me but would give me honest advice. I told them everything, from the initial signs to the evidence I uncovered. They were furious, just like I was, and they told me I deserved better, that I shouldn't let her get away with this, that I shouldn't be afraid to stand up for myself. Meanwhile, I started looking into what legal options I had. I wasn't sure if I wanted to divorce her immediately, but I knew I needed to protect myself and my assets. I also wanted to know if I had any rights regarding the baby. I wasn't ready to make any rash decisions, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this lie. I had to face her again, face her anger, her accusations, her tears. I knew she'd try to manipulate me, tell me I was overreacting or that I was jealous, but I wasn't falling for that anymore. The day I decided to confront her again, I was filled with a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. I told her we needed to talk seriously, and she reluctantly agreed. When she sat there, sulking and trying her usual tricks, I laid everything out. I told her I knew about her affair, about Mark, about the pregnancy. I told her I was done pretending that this was okay, done with her lies, done with being her punching bag. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I wanted her out of my life. Her reaction was typical. She tried to deny everything, saying I was crazy, that she never cheated, that Mark was just her brother, and I was just overreacting again. She threw a fit, screaming, crying, calling me names. She said I was a terrible husband, that I was possessive and controlling. She even tried to guilt trip me, saying the baby was innocent and I was ruining her life. But I wasn't falling for it. I looked her in the eyes and told her she had no one to blame but herself. If she'd been honest from the start, none of this would have happened. That day marked the start of the end. I moved out of the house, stayed with a friend for a while. It hurt like hell to leave everything behind: the house, the life I thought we had, the hopes I'd held on to. But I knew I had to get out to save whatever was left of my dignity and mental health. I felt empty, like I'd lost a piece of myself, but also relieved that I finally took control. I realized I'd been a fool for staying so long, for ignoring all the signs, for hoping she'd change. But now I was done. I was starting over, even though it felt like I was falling apart inside. Looking back, I see how much trust I lost, how much I let her manipulate me, but I also see a glimmer of hope. I'm angry, sure, but I know I'll rebuild. I'll find happiness again without her lying and cheating. I just wish I'd seen it sooner, wish I hadn't wasted so much time on someone who never really cared. Lesson learned: never ignore the signs, never let someone betray you and think they can get away with it. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can truly count on is yourself. The weeks that followed were a blur. Moving out, dealing with the shock of losing everything I thought was stable, and trying to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I won't lie, it was one of the hardest times I've ever gone through. Every day felt like a fight not to drown in the pain and anger. I'd see her face in my mind's eye constantly, her sneering, her lies, her pregnancy with Mark's kid. That image haunted me, but I knew I couldn't let it destroy me. I threw myself into work, trying to keep busy, but even then the pain wouldn't fully go away. I'd come home exhausted, only to be greeted by memories of all the lies she told, all the times I ignored the warning signs. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? How blind was I? Sometimes I'd get angry and call her just to hear her voice, hoping she'd admit everything. But she never did. She'd deny, calling me crazy, accusing me of trying to control her. That bitch was good at gaslighting. Meanwhile, I started seeing a counselor. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew I needed help to process this mess. Talking to someone who didn't judge me, who only listened and helped me sort through my feelings, was a relief. I told him everything, about the betrayal, my heartbreak, the anger boiling inside me. Slowly, I started to understand that I wasn't the problem. She was. She chose to cheat, to lie, to get pregnant with my brother's kid. That was her choice, her betrayal, not mine. I also reached out to my friends, especially some who knew my story from the beginning. They told me I was a fool for staying as long as I did, that I deserved better, that I needed to cut her out of my life completely. They helped me see that I'd been emotionally manipulated and that I needed to focus on healing myself. I started doing things I loved again: hiking, going to the gym, reconnecting with old hobbies I'd neglected. It wasn't easy, but I had to rebuild my sense of worth. One day, I finally got to the point where I could really think straight. I realized I had two options: keep letting her ruin my life or take control of it back. I chose the latter. I filed for divorce, got a lawyer, and made plans to get my life back. I wanted to be free of her lies, the pain, the betrayal. I knew it wasn't going to be simple. I'd have to fight for custody of the house, deal with the legal mess, and figure out how to move forward without feeling like I'd lost everything. But I was determined to do it. The divorce process was messy, of course. She fought hard, calling me controlling, possessive, and all the other names she could think of. She tried to keep the narrative that she was the victim, that I was just some jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. She even threw in the pregnancy, claiming I should support her because the kid was innocent. I just shook my head. I knew the truth and I refused to be manipulated anymore. I wanted out for good this time. During that time, I also took the opportunity to speak to Mark directly. I confronted him about everything. It was intense. I told him I knew what he'd done, how betrayed I felt, and that I no longer considered him family. He tried to justify it, saying he still loved her and that she needed him, but I cut him off. I told him he was dead to me now, that I'd never forgive him for sleeping with my wife, my flesh and blood brother, no less. That moment, I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing I'd finally called out the people who had hurt me the most. Looking back, I realized that I've learned some hard lessons about trust, loyalty, and self-respect. I won't let anyone treat me like a doormat again. I've come to accept that sometimes people you love will betray you in ways you never expected. But I also know that I can survive it, even if it feels like the end of the world at the time. You have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep fighting. Because if you don't, the betrayal wins. And I refuse to let her or anyone else have that power over me anymore. Getting through the divorce was just the start, honestly. Once it was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. For so long, I'd been caught up in the chaos, trying to prove what she did, fighting for my rights, dealing with the betrayal from my own brother. But once it was over, I realized I'd lost so much more than I thought. I lost my sense of stability, my trust in people, and a part of myself that I'd always held on to. The hardest part was accepting that she was never the person I thought she was. I kept replaying all the signs I missed, all the red flags I ignored because I loved her too much to see the truth. That little voice inside kept telling me I should have seen it coming, that I should have done something sooner. But I also learned that sometimes people hide who they really are behind a mask, and no matter how much you love them, they might just be pretending all along. One of the biggest realizations came from talking to a friend I trusted. We had a long, honest conversation about everything: trust, betrayal, how to move past it. She told me that I have to forgive, not necessarily her, but myself. I've carried so much guilt, thinking maybe I was too distant, too busy, too whatever. But the truth is, I was loyal. I loved her. I gave her everything I had. And she still betrayed me. That's not on me. So I started focusing on myself. I went back to therapy, worked on healing my emotional scars, and slowly started rebuilding my confidence. I got back into hobbies I'd dropped, playing guitar, hiking, even took up photography again. I knew I'd never forget what happened, but I also knew I couldn't let it define me. I had to find a way to live with what had happened, to learn from it so I could trust again someday. I also took some time to focus on my career. I threw myself into work more than ever. It gave me purpose, a distraction, and a way to feel like I was moving forward. I realized that I still had a lot to offer and I deserved to be happy again. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. Slowly, I started dating again, cautiously at first. I met some decent women, but honestly, the scars from her betrayal still lingered. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted someone who would respect me, someone I could trust. Looking back, I understand now that it's impossible to control other people's actions. You can only control how you respond. I could have stayed angry, bitter, but I chose to focus on healing instead. And honestly, that's been the best decision I ever made. Because if I had held on to that rage forever, I'd never move forward. I learned that people will let you down. Sometimes the ones closest to you, even family, will hurt you in ways you never thought possible. But at the end of the day, you have to choose to rebuild, to move on, and to never let someone's betrayal destroy your sense of self. Life's too short for that. Now, looking back, I realize that all the pain and betrayal taught me something I never expected: resilience. I thought I was broken, that I'd never recover from losing everything I loved: her, my brother, the life I thought I had. But somehow, I found a way to stand back up. I found strength in the fact that I survived the worst betrayal of my life. I learned that the only person responsible for my happiness now is me. I still get angry sometimes, especially when I think about how she lied and cheated, how she played me for a fool, and how Mark, my own brother, betrayed everything we ever stood for. But those feelings don't control me anymore. They've become part of my past, part of my story, but they don't define who I am. What defines me is my ability to forgive myself for trusting her in the first place and to forgive her for what she did. Not because she deserves it, but because I do. I've come a long way from that broken man hiding in the corner of his own life. I've learned that even the deepest wounds can heal if you give yourself time and patience. I've also learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for growth. I've become more cautious about who I trust, yes, but also more aware of my worth. I know I don't need someone who would betray me, who would lie and cheat and ruin everything for their own selfish reasons. Now, I focus on what really matters, my own happiness, my mental health, my future. I don't hold grudges for long, but I remember the lessons. I remind myself that being loved and respected is what everyone deserves, and if someone can't give me that, then they're not worth my time. I've learned to set boundaries, to stand up for myself, and to walk away from toxic people, no matter how much it hurts. Most importantly, I've realized that life isn't about holding onto the past or dwelling on what went wrong. It's about moving forward, about building a life that's true to who I am now. I may have been destroyed by her betrayal, but I'm not defeated. I've rebuilt myself from the ashes, and I know I'll be okay. That's what I want anyone reading this to understand, no matter how bad it hurts, no matter how deep the betrayal, you have the power to choose your future. You just have to be willing to take the first step.